All right, good evening, everyone. With the posted time having arrived and a quorum of members present, I'll call the Finance Committee Budget Workshop Session Number 5 to order. Today is Tuesday, October 25th, 2022, and we've got just a couple items on our agenda tonight. The first one is to approve the minutes of our previous meeting from 10/11 of 22, copies of which are in the packets. Any revisions or corrections necessary for the minutes? If not, I'll take a motion to approve the minutes. Motion by Denny, is there a second? Second by Martins. Further discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? None are opposed, minutes are approved. Item number 2 is discussion and possible action regarding ARPA funding requests and related budget modification. These are the budget requests that we had just scored for the end of last week, which are basically all of the capital requests for the water and sewer utility. As we had discussed last night, applying ARPA towards these water and sewer systems really will help us work toward improvement on the financial health of the utility, because it would prevent them from further borrowing, at least for this year. I think Mary Ann passed out the score sheets. You should have those in front of you. All of the projects scored well, which was expected. And so now we just have to decide what we want to move forward. If it's your desire to move them all forward, we could just take a motion to that effect. Or do we want to parse them out a little bit? It's up to you guys.
Question.
I'll start things here.
Okay, start us off.
Yeah, I think, for the most part, the vast majority of these requests, they scored the same or higher, is because, the sewer mains and the water mains, it's hard to differentiate one from the other. But yeah, the only thing that really was below the median was the solar array study. And I guess my question would be, if we decide to not fund this at this point in time, is that study still hanging out there for the water utility to absorb, or?
Why don't we ask Eric, is there an unfunded professional service if we would not move this forward, Eric, or is this a continuation of stuff that's already been paid?
Well, there's, the commission approved this, and so we're under contract.
Okay.
Okay.
For this. Obviously, we can go back. We're in the middle of revising the scope, amending the scope, because we've kind of taken a step back and doing a little bit different. Rather than jumping right into design, we're going to be doing some more public outreach and stuff, so. But we are under contract for this amount approved by the commission, yeah.
So you've already paid for about half of the
That's correct.
the allocated $235,000. So changing the scope still puts the utility on the hook for the full amount-ish, depending on how far you want to go with it.
Right.
Yes. Do we want to move this over to ARPA?
Well,
or-
I guess the one thing, because that really then, any of the expenses that are offset in the utility at this point, whether they're debt funded or not, are helpful to the financial well-being of the utility, given their borrowing strain that we have with the two plants. So I will say that the solar array study, the only people publicly that are really more familiar with even the concept or what the plans look like is the immediate neighborhood surrounding the plant, and they're lukewarm on the idea at best. But by and large, the rest of the community is unaware. And I think if we wanted fair public engagement, we need a little bit of a wider effort. For us to navigate in either direction based on a straw poll of just my residents really isn't fair to everyone else. So, I think if they need to finish the study, it would make sense to move it forward and, remove that financial liability from their budget.
Yeah.
If we have ARPA to do it with, especially this will actually also cut down the energy costs at the plant if it would proceed.
Yeah, and my feeling is that, if we're going to move forward with the solar, the solar system, it's got to be at least the medium size or larger. Otherwise, it's not going to be cost effective.
Do you mind if I just interrupt for one moment?
Yeah.
I'm sorry,
Certainly.
Alder and
Chair. So at the last Utility Commission meeting, they did ask me to come up with a task force, creating that, so including some folks from the neighborhood, some expertise, some things like that. So that will be coming. We will still obviously need plans and that for them to react to, but we hope that this I don't know if I'm calling it a task force or a work group yet. I need to rewatch to make sure, but that is coming up. There will be engagement with the community in a meaningful way. So
Okay.
in case that changes your opinion.
It will just be good to see that happen on a broader range than just the area that surrounds the plant. I mean, obviously, the immediate neighbors are the most affected by the presence of the facility, but in the 2 public engagement sessions that we've had with them, the largest of the projects was the most incendiary. The smallest one was their favorite, and then the middle one they can certainly tolerate, but the largest one was a non-starter. And I think we determined that that particular plan would generate enough energy to sell some back to public service, that the plant wouldn't need it all, but that any of those 3 sizes does meet the needs of the plant and reduce its costs, right? So,
Yeah, so, without specific design, so obviously the larger one would, while it's generating power, the plant would use the majority of it, but there would be some during certain times where we would sell back to WPS. The mid-size solar array, we would anticipate when it's generating, we would try to adjust our operations to have our max loads during that period of time of the day, to try to maximize the amount of power that's coming off of that. But there would be times when we would have to pull off the grid for sure with any of these options, at night and things like that, so.
go ahead, Doug.
Question, sure. So when the commission approved spending the money, what was their anticipated funding source at the time?
So typically we'll do a capital improvements projects, which the commission and the city council will approve, just like what's happening right now in the budget process. And so then, after that, then we determine what is going to be borrowed and when, right, with those projects. And so this project would have either come out of operating expenses, or it would have come out of borrowing. Yep.
So the contract, though, for the professional services to date was out of the professional services line item, though, right? So there was
Yeah.
a budget for those services prior.
Right. Right, and we have just not borrowed on the utility. Sometimes we'll do that late in the year, middle of the year, it just depends on timing of projects and as we go forward, so.
Okay.
Well, I just, what Mike had mentioned at the last meeting is he was questioning what we've already spent so far. So how much of this 235 is still left to be spent? And I guess for just the process of how this landed on this list, I object to. So I mean, I would move that we approve everything but that for ARPA at this point and send it back to the commission to come back to us with a better plan.
So is it about half of it, I thought we had
Yes,
said before?
Yeah, I included it in the email that I sent you with the document. It was 102,000, 103,126.95.
So just under half? Mm-hmm. Okay, and so you certainly could forward all of the projects except the solar array study, and you would put that one, basically on your hold column where we've got all the other ARPA projects that we haven't funded. It could sit there, I mean, it kind of just sits in limbo, and then, receiving additional information or insight from the commission, you certainly could revive the discussion if you wanted to at any point, but you wouldn't have to take it tonight if,
I mean, that's my recommendation. It seems like we're spending a lot to communicate with non-residents at this point, and we've had a lot of discussion over the last year on the solar array. Let's park this.
okay? So would it be your motion then to forward every project for ARPA funding except that one?
That is correct.
Okay. So I have a motion from Denny to approve all of the projects that were ranked for tonight with the exception of the solar array study. Do we have a second?
I'll second that, and then I want to make a comment.
Okay, we have a second from Martins. Go ahead, Mike.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I'm totally in favor of the solar array, and I think it's going to be good, long-term for the water utility, but maybe if there is going to be a scope change, parking this and then seeing what that scope change is going to entail will help us to kind of better understand how we want to use ARPA funds for this particular project, so.
Well, that's true. And, we are late in the season now for any and all of it, basically.
Yeah.
And so, depending on where this falls, I mean, I don't know that, I think that I feel like the array could be installed at any time. It's not like we're under a
No,
time constraint. It doesn't have to be in by a particular date. So, I mean, obviously, between the scope change and then, working on the funding part slows it down a little bit, but it certainly doesn't kill it. So,
Yeah, when Eric and I were discussing this in advance, one of the things that we had talked about was, if there would be funding on the federal or state level that, looked at renewable energy, this then would be in kind of a shovel-ready condition. And so we thought that might be one of the benefits. I mean, obviously, the utility could also decide to, pause the project for a while.
or apply for grant funding
Or, yeah.
if there is some available.
Yeah.
So,
That, I think,
Okay.
was the main, at least to me, when Eric and I were talking, the main reason we thought, maybe the council would be interested in funding the balance of it, again, given the,
it might
financial
also be something
constraints
that
of
we
the
could look at
utility.
for surplus or carryover, because
Yep,
we're
we
winding
could.
down to the end of the year, and knowing if we have project savings in other areas, or we have unspent carryover that we could look at. I mean, where, we have unallocated amounts or budget profit, if there is some. There's other sources that we could use besides ARPA to look at it in the future, at any point, because that's the process that we exercise pretty routinely. So just while Carol's getting settled here, Carol, just to bring you up to speed, we just started on, you're fine. We just started on the ARPA requests, and we have a motion from Doug to forward all of the ARPA requests for funding, with the exception of the solar array study, with a second from Michael.
And just to
Go
clarify,
ahead.
I'm not intending, I'm doing this to try to squash the project. I would, if I was voting on a project, I would pick the largest solar array we could put in there for the efficiency. But I think this process is not the right way to do it.
Well, and there may be other fund sources, like Mary Ann said, and I think maybe putting a pause on it for now to see what those might be makes some sense. And it also scored below all of the other projects that you guys have sent forward. So with that, any additional comment or discussion? If not, with a motion on the floor and a second, the members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None are opposed. So those requests will move forward then.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. The other item on our agenda tonight is, let's see, budget discussions and action regarding recommending a 2023 budget, including the setting of the 2023 fee schedule, which is a standing item for us. We could start with the supplements.
Yep, let's do that.
Last night, and well, I guess over the weekend and last night, we all were grinding out those ratings, and so Mary Ann has compiled those. So you have a sheet in front of you that now adds 2 columns, and it shows the score, the average score, and then it also shows the estimated tax rate impact. So these are in fractions of cents. I mean, you'll see that some of these things don't even, they're a fraction of a penny for the smaller things. And then other things, like staffing requests, you can see that in many cases, those are 2 and 3 cents on the mill rate. And so those are the things that we have to talk through and see what of those projects we wish to include in the budget. One thing that we were just talking about before the meeting is that within the Parks Department, it appears that there is a decent-sized unspent carryover amount that may remain from the end of this year that could perhaps cover some of these smaller projects without adding them to the budget. Because all of them are, they're smaller things, even if you add them all up, with the exception of Emerald Ash Borer, and depending on the amount, even including that too. I think we've selectively funded Emerald Ash Borer at various stages, depending on where we were at in terms of whether or not the budget year was exceedingly difficult or not. This is a difficult year. And the fact that they're treating ash borer right now with, some level of success, are we in a position right now to add 3 more cents to the mill rate to just do that project bigger? Myself personally, I don't feel like we are. I mean, that's a project that we have had on CIP a couple years. We've funded it in some manner. They are doing some treatment. They just want to do more treatment. I don't feel like this is the year to expand that, given the fact that it's got such a tax rate impact. That's 85,000. But there's smaller projects. When we look at the invasive species, the goat thing, the pool pump, we look at these little extra tree plantings. I feel like if there is this unspent carryover that's available in the budget, that they may finish well under budget for 2022, it would make sense to ask them to attempt to fund these things out of that first. We always can make we can look at surplus, we can look at profit, we can look at carryover next year. We can do a modification if we have to shift between line items if we have to. But I feel like building some of that in on the front end for even those smaller amounts isn't critical. I mean, how do you guys feel about that? Carol?
Do you know how much is left in the budget?
So I think maybe if Jamie, I don't know if you had a chance to look at your capital, no, you didn't, okay. Okay,
So, and some of it's for cost savings, some of it's for unfinished work. So I think that, though, absent an analysis of, where they're at, she's got her laptop with. So let's take a look and just see some of this.
I'm trying to find we have a small, so this is our small project fund. We present to you with a budget, a small projects list every year that we have for both the city and the county. And it's this fund is used for deferred maintenance items that don't quite make the CIP request. So they're anything under about that $30,000. We had some leftover funds this year because we had, a lot of the times what happens is we have a project like we were going to redo the decking on Barker Stewart Island Bridge. We went out for quotes and the quotes came in twice as high as what we had budgeted. So we put that project off, which frees that money up. So there are times each year, and we have, based on what Mary Ann sent me, we haven't spent our entire budget every year. So I think, it's a revolving fund that we have that we can use on projects. But like this year, I don't think we'll spend the entire amount, and I can find out exactly what we're going to spend. But like this year, we found the cracks at the base of the pillars on the 400 stage that really needed to be addressed. It wasn't something we originally had on our list, but it was a $20,000 project that we were able to shuffle some of those projects around and get it paid for out of that fund. So that fund is there for those type of projects. So, basically we use it for what we have planned, and if we don't have enough money, we push that project off to the next year. So the smaller things, I think, like the pool pumps, I think we can definitely take out of there. If we are allowed, that would be a conversation Mary and I could have, and about whether we could take tree planting and the tree removals out of there, because I don't know if that really falls in the definition of the deferred maintenance, like we had set that fund up, but I guess that's at the discretion of the city council. As far as the Emerald Ash Borer, that's the only one I wouldn't put in there because I feel that's a completely separate project. It would take away a lot from our deferred maintenance items that we're doing, but the smaller ones, I think probably we could use that, yes.
Okay. So if we could put underneath there, or at least attempt to, and we always can make some, once we close out the year and we see where we're at in terms of both profit, surplus, and carryover, we always can look at these things again. I mean, these smaller things. But if we would take, and let's say we take off and try to fund out of there the invasive species goat situation, the pool pump, even if we don't get the 2 tree items out of there, I mean, that really is $11,000. If we had project savings in another area, we could certainly look at a request to repurpose those early in the year and, capture that way versus building that into the budget on the front end, because all of it has mill rate pressure. Sarah?
So, looking at the Emerald Ash Board thing, it says critical. So why, can you tell us a little bit about why it's uber critical? Is it would it eventually end, right? Like we would conquer?
We would, because all the ash trees would be gone.
Right. So, I mean.
That is our goal.
The goal, so time frame, and then why did you rank it critical versus high, like you did some of the other ones?
I ranked it critical because we found emerald ash borer about 2 years now. And like I had said earlier, when we get to that about 4-year mark of knowing that the bugs are in the tree, we'll start to see some extensive die back of our trees. And we will have some standing dead trees just like that in the spring. And because we're getting closer to that year 4, I think we're creeping up on that possibility that we may have more standing dead than we can actually get to if we don't try to stay with our plan to treat as many as we can each year, or that, I think we had it in thirds, treat a third, a third, a third, and then we remove a third and then replant in those areas is what our plan was. And we haven't funded it fully to what the actual cost would be to do that full third yet. Because we had just found it and it hasn't been to the point where we have standing dead. But as we creep closer to that 4 or 5 year mark, I think we'll see more trees that we'll need to remove right away because they'll be hazardous. We don't want to get in a situation like other communities have had where they have a full street of dead trees and then we start having limbs fall on cars and on people and stuff like that. We want to try to stay ahead of it as much as possible.
Right, but some ash borer treatment is already built in the budget, and it's
Correct.
happening at some
Correct.
level. This
Yes.
just makes a larger effort.
Yes.
And in the meantime, it puts 3 cents of mill rate pressure on in a rough year. So is that something that we could wait on, and even if, whether we look at it from an alternate fund source further into 2023, or even if we hold it off for 1 year, I feel like we have capitalized it in the past. It's not like we're doing nothing toward this problem.
So
Go ahead, Doc.
last night you indicate, if that was a question.
No, it's not. It was a statement.
So last night you indicated that this was by a prior council approved, but only partially budgeted. What was it like 190,000 or
It
something?
was a
like that?
ton. I don't,
The approval that was taking place was that we would address the ash trees within the community within 12 to 15 years. And so I have to go back and look, I think we had roughly, oh boy, I'll get you a number of how many ash trees we had. We had a full count of the number of ash trees in the community. And so trying to break it up of treating so many and removing so many a year to stay ahead of it, that was how we put a dollar figure to that to try to get that completed within, originally it was within 7 years. But knowing that the funding wasn't completely funded for the full amount of what the plan would take to get it done in 7 years, we pushed it out to 12 to 15 years. And so we're still a little short on our dollar amount per year to keep within that 12 to 15 year time frame of getting it complete. But we're doing what we can each year. And if I could say, that amount that I'm requesting is to get it up to that full amount that would be what was approved to get it done in that 10 to 15 years. If it's a portion of that amount, just to add to what we already have budgeted, that would just give us a little bit extra to treat a few extra or to remove a little extra more to add to the number that we've been doing each year. So it doesn't necessarily have to be all or nothing. It could be any amount that would just get us closer to that goal of the number of trees we want to treat and remove each year.
so do we know what the balance is on that small projects account right now?
So
Go ahead.
I was going to say, the budget is 110. Today, the modified budget is 205 because we carried over what was not being used. And I think there was, did I say 79,000 spent?
69,000 we
Okay.
have spent.
69 out of 210?
Yeah. The
Yeah,
other thing I
have
had
to
thought
check,
about
'cause we had
was,
more.
when I looked at the expenses and saw those 400 block, I mean, we could reclassify those to the 400 block fund, which would then bring that actual expenses in that 240 in your small projects fund down even further, which would bring more capacity to fund some of these other things that were requested.
Yeah, what I'm trying to find out is why we had such a amount carried over, because I don't have that in my records. But that's what I just have to, I haven't had a chance to compare what we
Gotcha.
planned and what we spent and what that is, so I
Well,
can
and
do
that's
that.
why I would like to see us see where we end 2022, because every year, about the first quarter, that's when we look at those things. We go back and we look at where we're at in terms of work in progress that didn't get finished, and we process carryover for all of that. But then if there's, unfinished projects that are, of a critical need, we certainly can go back and take a look at those, because then alternative funding sources will show themselves if we finish the year in a good place. I mean, we don't even know yet what November and December snow is going to look like yet. If we start with a easy winter, our numbers may look pretty good at the end of this year, and then we can go back to the work list and say, well, what else could we get done for a small amount of this money, rather than dump this on the taxpayer right now in the next budget? Because, even with the small projects fund, if there is that volume of carryover, there does need to be a top end for how long we will sit on unspent funds. I mean, we can't just leave it sit waiting for something to happen or go wrong, because if something happens and goes wrong, we can consider all that stuff, on a emergency basis. Come in and tell us what happened, and we'll find some money for it. But, we should not be from year to year to year sitting on, over $100,000 and then building into the tax levy projects that are of these small amounts like this. So, Carol?
Thank you. I agree. I couldn't be here last night, but I watched it all live, so I did get to see all of your presentations, and it was really helpful. So, Jamie, I was wondering, these trees, the emerald ash borer, I mean, it's still throughout the whole city, right?
Yes.
So is it pretty evenly spread in areas then that are?
No, right now, the higher concentration that we found and the most trees we've been trying to deal with are in the northeast corner of the city.
Okay.
That has been pretty significant tree loss this year, and trying to find the number of trees that are infected. We do have pockets throughout the city, but the northeast corner has been pretty bad.
Okay, thank you. And I guess that was my concern, and because I've been, thinking of this, especially in reading these as well, that, I would, of course, prefer that we don't put these on the levy, to the taxpayers, but my concern would be the risk to someone's car, houses, whatever. So if we can wait and see if, what money is left,
Yep, I do feel like it's up to the city forester and his team to decide, when it comes time for removals, what priority order removals happen in. And so every year they mark so many trees that are, lifeless and whatnot. But if there's some that are a known hazard, it's up to them to prioritize them and get them down first. And they certainly have that knowledge and that skill set without, added funding for it. So, I mean, if something is really a serious hazard and they've got a standing dead tree that looks like it poses a risk to people's property, they would certainly, I imagine, mark that and get that out of there before something that was, safer. So.
Yeah, and the other part of it too is if we happen to get to that spring and we see a significant dieback where we know we don't have enough funds and to take care of it. I mean, we mentioned it last night. I can come back to the
Yes.
city council and ask for that budget amendment too. So
Yes.
this budget is us being more proactive, but we'll continue to be as proactive as we can be. And if we get, to that point where we're a little bit behind, we will come and ask for more.
Yes, and we would certainly consider that at that point. So it makes sense to save that funding. So that then would allow us to address some of the other supplements. But if we could play it that way, that would be very helpful.
Okay.
Okay. The next request, we've got, let's see, we have 3 from fire. 2 of the 3, well, actually, maybe it's 3 of the 3, do not even add up to 2 cents, I think. We've got the $1,020, which is for the investigative module for their software, is miles away from even being a penny. We've got the mental health check-in, which is not even half a cent. And then we have where's the other one? Why did I not see it? I must have went right past it.
Bottom.
Oh, it's the training. Okay, and so, yes, and so it's the training for the 13,000. How do you guys feel about those? I think we'll just take them by department as we can here. Are you wanting to, they did
So-
score, they scored pretty high. Sarah?
I think just at this time, maybe just focusing on the mental health portion. The others ones seem less critical, but I know the mental health one is pretty important, I think, to have it standardized across police and fire.
I guess, I feel like we should do at least some kind of an increase on the training part, because last year, we had them send one person who ended up self-funding a portion of his trip, or a portion of his participation in that trip. I mean, maybe you don't get 5 or 6 people, but could we get a couple more? If they've got training staff, maybe it doesn't need to be the 13,000, but, you know, I do feel like if they've got a team down there that's in charge of training, that maybe more than one person.
And I guess I look at that as they're going to be onboarding a lot of people hopefully in the next year.
Where training becomes even more important.
But during the onboarding portion, I don't think that kind of training is probably as important. That seems more specialized, in my opinion. Whereas the mental health probably is more important, especially for a new person on a department.
Well, absolutely.
And I'm just thinking, not that I honestly would love to fund all of these. But I mean, at least just one of the projects from the department, that is my favorite to go forward.
Okay. What do you guys think? Mike, go ahead.
My question wasn't the mobile fire investigation software, wasn't that replacing an obsolete or outdated application?
I think it was an added module for the system they already have.
Okay.
So at the time of purchase, they didn't have that component. Right, chief?
You're both right.
Okay.
So,
That doesn't happen every day.
yeah, it replaced our firehouse, which had been our inspection module before firehouse was being phased out, was being bought by a bigger company that was trying to sell their all-in-one software. We were going to be left without a fire reporting software, without an investigation software. So this is Tracy Kajawa's legacy yet. We researched what we wanted. Inspectors wanted APX. We went to Image Trend for our fire reporting, which then married up with our EMS reporting. It was a big change last year in that. And so we did phase out an old, antiquated software program. We welcomed in APX. It's worked very well for the inspectors. Now they're asking for an inspection module. I can't speak intelligently about what magic this module does for our fire investigators, but they're asking for it because they think it would be an added benefit to what they're doing in the fire investigation side of the house.
Okay, so this was listed as a medium priority, so it may or may not be something that's necessary for this coming year, or?
Well, I listed that as medium because I didn't see it as a life safety issue, so that's how I'll
Okay.
list it for our department.
Well,
While it would be nice and convenient for those people, I mean, are they going to get by without it? Sure. Would it be convenient, maybe make their job easier to do? Yes.
Well, and given that, just because we just had a conversation with Director Polly about small projects also, and this is like tiny as well, is this also something that we could put a pin in and see where we finish this year? And, you know, if we come out and we're, you know, $1,000 to the good, I think we would be happy to take this list again and see how much of the leftover on the list we could accomplish, you know, without,
I guess possibly, but then this is going to be something that's going to be a reoccurring cost, so you'd probably want to get that baked into the budget for future years.
right, and probably analyze what that, if it's that amount every year, we'd have to inflate.
Did you look at your capital, small projects, capital account?
We have, actually, I just reviewed that this afternoon. We're expecting a little bit of surplus in our 240 account, which is our capital improvement new, and so there is a possibility that we will have that. We also anticipate that we're going to have an overage in a couple other lines, so I may be coming in December for
Okay.
a budget mod
Sure.
to move inside our budget.
Well, and if we find that through some of that savings in other lines, if we can do a shift and capture that 1,000 in there, we could get it that way, rather
Yeah.
than build it in the budget?
Yeah.
Okay? All right. So
I
let me-
have just one quick question on that.
Go ahead.
You'd mentioned you're phasing out an old system. Is there a fee associated with that old system? So there's like an offset here?
There was, and we did a capital improvements project last year to onboard the new systems. That was all in last year's budget. So we didn't have any change of software this year. So we're in year 2 of it.
Okay.
So, and the other thing, I guess, when we look at the specialty training, rather than 13,100, what is the amount that gets you 2 people sent to the convention? and fund, so that they're not paying for their participation out of pocket.
Yeah, and first, I totally agree with Alder Watson's comments, and I appreciate that. If I had to prioritize these two things, the mental health would be number
Right.
one. If there's anything of these three that we desperately need, it's that.
It's that, okay.
The training, yes, we would be happy. I think if we had $4,000 to $5,000 additional funding there, and then maybe we tweak some of our other stuff, I always ask our staff to put in for grants to attend this. I asked our training division chief to submit. He's an outstanding instructor. He submitted to speak. Unfortunately, he wasn't selected to speak. Then that pays for his registration in the hotel and other things like that. It's an extremely expensive conference. And so if we had maybe even half that amount of money, I'm sure we could make, we could really make a difference. We'd at least get our training division chief there and maybe one or two of our other internal instructors to attend that conference with them.
So committee, would you be amenable to reduce the 13.1 to 5? Go ahead, Carol.
Just a really quick comment. That's exactly what I was wondering, and I think, too, the mental health is, that's what I was prioritizing myself. And just wondering with the training, is that then something, what they learn there, that they can come back and train
Yes,
others?
that's the whole purpose of the conference. It's the Fire Department Instructors Conference, so it's actually an international conference. You'll have, I've been in classes with, people from Australia and China and all kinds of things in this conference. It's an amazing platform, and it is a train the trainer type conference. These instructors go there to get lessons, lesson plans, stuff that they can come back here and share. And so it's a very important thing, and with us trying to stay forward and on the cutting edge of what we do, and safety is a huge issue. When we can do our job safer, it's a lot of time not about new equipment, it's about how we do our things and protocols. I think it is important that way. So that they are lessons where we send a couple of instructors there, they come back, and it impacts the department in its entirety.
Thank you. I do think then if we can, or if you can, that having more than one person, having at least a couple of people does help, especially with that too.
Well, especially if there's breakout sessions, they can go to
Yeah,
different
yep.
ones. That's the thing. When you send one person, they have to choose to attend or not attend all of the material that's of benefit. So, I mean, would you guys be amenable to reducing the 13.1 to 5 for this year? Okay, and then what we'll do is we'll kind of have Mary Ann add this up for us at the end too. Okay, so that, and mental health, none of us even want to argue about that. We all are in favor of mental health, so we're good on that. Let's then take a look at the requests that we have from the police department. You have a couple there. We have the OWI blood draws. It feels, they have to do it. I feel like that's a situation where you don't get to not investigate OWI, right? So that one scored highly. The community outreach funding for the outreach coordinator also scored well. The third item we have from them is the added body cameras. The first two items add up to half of 1 cent. So we're not even really, not much impact there. The cameras are
Penny. It's almost a penny.
0.6 of a penny. So you have, if you do all three, you've got about a penny, right? So,
So I guess I would vote in favor of all three, because I think the police department cameras, it's sort of a crucial thing to maintain integrity, which is important. And then obviously, I'm very supportive of anything to help with the community outreach specialist.
yeah.
And I think it's, like you said, it's unavoidable to not do the OWI, because unless we investigate other vendors.
Well, and they're not, right, and they're not going back to breathalyzers, so.
Right, but I mean, maybe an ask would be to look at other providers of the OWI test and see if there's more of a competitive bid for next year, and then maybe switching from Aspirus. That would be my
Pending, I
ask.
mean, that certainly would be worth looking at. I think we'd have to analyze their mileage back and forth to St. Clair's if that's where they'd have to go, if that's the only other place, because sometimes they need these at odd hours of the day and night, so, but yeah, I mean, if.
But I think putting together like just a
Yeah, and I agree on the cameras. When we first funded the cameras, that's the best defense they have, when stuff is called into question. So, and that's been beneficial before. What do you guys think? Take all three?
Yeah.
Michael?
Yeah, I just want to make one comment about the cameras. And maybe the chief can inform us on this, but since there was the need for the cameras was, became evident because there was a deficiency found in an internal investigation. Would not funding the cameras have any impact on the accreditation of the police department?
No, it won't have an impact on the accreditation.
Okay.
No. I mean, we've become accredited since we got body cameras, and the Detective Bureau hasn't had them, so it won't impact the accreditation.
Okay.
Okay. It does make sense, so that they have them, and they have them at the ready.
Oh, yeah, especially if there's, you know, they have to be reassigned. You know,
that's the thing.
When they're given to a different person, so I can see as an administrative
Makes sense.
function, it makes sense to add these cameras.
Yeah, and the thing I didn't talk about last night is our Detective Bureau often operates from their office at the police department, but when there is an active situation and we need assistance out in the community, they respond to those incidents. And oftentimes, they don't have the ability to run downstairs, grab a camera, because it adds time to the response. So having a camera that's assigned to them will have them have access to it on their vest that they'll just throw on right at their desk. So it does enhance the likelihood that they'll have a camera with them.
Yeah.
And of course, that's, I think, what our goal is to every officer in the community that responds to an incident, to have a camera with them.
Well, right, because you can get that many more angles of a situation, and then, if there's anything that's called into question, you've got clear evidence too,
Right.
so. Okay, so,
I've
go ahead, Doug.
question it, because you just triggered a question. So oftentimes detectives work out of uniform, or are they all, okay, so potentially then they would be dressed like you with a camera, or would they have the
Yeah,
option to
so-
not wear the camera?
Yeah, so they have a vest carrier where they carry all their equipment, so they would be dressed, similar to me, and they would throw the vest on over top of their clothes that they have. So it says police, and they have access to all their gear, so it's right in their cube or it's in their car, and when they're responding to a call, they throw it on, and then
But
that's when
on
they're
some of
carrying.
their routine work, they wouldn't necessarily be suited that way.
Correct, but they still take a camera with them, especially on their routine stuff, so they can record the interactions that they have with people. But that's out of convenience. They can go grab a camera downstairs and take it with
Okay.
them. But they still do carry it with them, even with this. They might just set it on a table in the room. They might not have it attached to them, but they'll take it with them.
Well,
I'm
I
sure.
would support the one-to-one, so we're not sharing cameras.
I think it eliminates the margin for error with data being mislabeled or missed, so. Okay, so take all three of those, right? And so then that brings us, we've got one from, we've got one from economic development. We've got a .5 position. That one, they do have alternate funding for a portion of it, so their budget ask is 11,500, which is just under half a cent. In the past, this position was requested, and so I will say that the one thing that we had asked was that we start to look at, as an organization, breaking down the silos that exist where clerical staff can be shared. And so we have a lot of departments where, they've got that administrative assistant 2 or 3. The work may be a little different, but they are all very capable of learning. And so do we have departments where their peak seasons are conducive such that, those employees could be shared? If this is a half-time position and this is something that we need 3 hours a day, or when they're not there, and the ask that I had made in the past was that we would maybe start in the inspection department looking for that clerical person to share, because they're right down the hall. So for a part of a day, hey, can you come and sit down here for a couple hours and help us out, rather than bring on yet more budgetary pressure for, yet another employee, and try this sharing first. Determine if it works or it doesn't work, because right now, there's been a reluctance to share people between departments, but I think that we have to get to a point, and I think Sarah was alluding to it last night, how we utilize these resources the best way possible. And if we have people that, occasionally, the inspection season is less active in the winter when everything is covered by snow. You're not going out to look at people's yards necessarily. A lot of the stuff becomes interior. And so, is it a situation where, we could try something different first? Sarah?
So I sort of had this idea, I was thinking about it, because I think, Mary Ann, you mentioned that we're going to be looking at maybe securitizing City Hall a little bit more. And I was thinking, as you go up to the offices on the second floor, could there be an administrative assistant that is sort of at the front to direct to where people need to go? Sort of acting as a catch-all to all of the offices, and manning the phones and all that, sort of up at the front, similar to how like our clerks are, right? They sort of help manage all of those.
Gatekeeper type.
Right.
Yeah.
And then also, I worry too with what Director Brodick said, like she asked for that like share and nobody came up with it. So I don't know if there's a directive we can have as a council to say, all right, we do want to have a sharing option. This is how we need to have it planned out. Because I don't blame them for not wanting to offer up a person that's integral to their office and say, oh yeah, take this person for a few hours. So, I mean,
I do think that if it is in our spirit, as far as the way we fund it in the budget, or don't, and we have those discussions, I do believe that it is within the department head and the mayor's authority working together to reallocate those internal resources as they manage the function of City Hall. So I don't know that they necessarily need to be told by us to share. Obviously, no one's going to offer up their staff on the first pass, but I think as a result of some of their discussions, if they have a staff meeting coming up in the next few weeks or whatever, the discussion needs to be had about sharing people whose 40 hours are perhaps, we may have the people in the same pay grade who are, one is maxed out and the other one has a little time. Well, when they first took that position in community development, if I remember right, or economic development, that person was sharing time between the clerk's office and up there, and then ended up leaving the clerk's office to work there full time. And then Chris decided that he wanted that second assistant planner, and so he sacrificed that position to fund that second planner. So, that position was had and given up, and now we're trying to get it back, but it's adding added budgetary pressure. But if, when that was started, that person had time to split between the clerk's office helping out and working up there, I feel like there's got to be somebody else in this building that could try that for a while. And, if they try it for 6 months and it's not working or it's horrible, maybe then come back and we can talk about, this again. But we haven't even tried any of this sharing right now. So what do you guys think? Doug?
Well, you do make a good point about consolidating tasks or sharing amongst departments. We have a videographer, I think it's assigned to the PD. No? Does work, okay, but works for the
working all
mayor,
over.
but works for
Yep.
any department that needs,
Yep.
at some point, will be able to be managed by the mayor's office. Maybe that's the more logical spot to concentrate on.
Well,
And-
but either way, already, even the way we have it structured, he's making videos for DPW, and he's making videos he made one just recently about train horns, and,
Right.
super useful because we share this resource, and so I feel like we have a qualified and competent administrative assistant clerical team that exists within the various departments. Do we have somebody who we could split time a little bit and at least try it as an experiment? I feel like that would be helpful. Because we need to know if that works or not before we add more people, is what I feel like. Sarah?
but I also want to have have a assurance that it's going to happen. Because I don't want it to go, we pass it over, because it's not a huge ask. Really, a half a cent or whatever. But I want to make sure that it happens. I don't want to be here next year and that office being dark when people aren't there, or people multitasking when they should be focusing on developing our economy. So I want to make sure it happens.
Okay.
The downside to that approach is it's an ad hoc approach, and I think it needs to be more structured than that, potentially. And
What we could do.
we talked about, at one time, thought about having a communications person.
Right.
There's probably tasks that could add up to another person at some point down the road.
Right. There are, but, I think we need to figure out what those tasks are and where they are, what the time looks like. Obviously, we are not working at City Hall on a daily basis, but, they are. And I think between the department heads and the mayor, they should be able to figure out who has whom for these employees, and, who might be able to be spared for a couple hours a day. Sarah?
A silly question. Is there an org chart? For City Hall?
It's a good question.
Well,
There's
there's
one
an
for each
org chart
department
for
in the
each
budget.
department in the budget book.
Okay.
But, I mean,
Like that has all of the,
Each department
Oh,
has
okay.
one as their cover page, kind of, for who reports to who. So, and I guess I'll just briefly, I guess, just ask this question of the mayor because we have her with us. Is this something that you could discuss at your staff meeting, Mayor, and maybe report back? Getting a thumbs up from her. So that's something that I think she can discuss internally and report back to us as far as if those resources can be shared, time shared.
I guess the only thing that the org chart doesn't show is how many administration is in each, they list the job descriptions, but like I was sort of hoping, because where I work, I have like an org chart which like has names
So you
coming
know
out,
who's
and,
who?
like, yeah, and so how many administrative assistants do each of these offices hold, and like where could you shuffle around?
I think it's assumed, it's one, if you go to like Public Works, it does say then how many FTEs there would be.
Oh, okay.
So if you go to like page 67,
It's tiny.
yeah, sorry. It is tiny. Yeah.
Administrative assistant 2 in inspections and zoning is 2
Yeah.
FTE. There's 2 in the administration office. There's, just looking at it that way, I mean, we could kind of tell through the chart. It's teeny tiny. I see, I'm doing that same thing. I'm doing that same thing, except I had, but I think that that's a discussion that can be had, and I think it should be had internally, and that's something that, they could report back to us on before we even finalize for the 2023. Hello, Mayor.
I will tell you, we have had this discussion a couple of times. We will go ahead and have it again. You'll recall maybe a year and a half ago, we had a similar discussion about maybe splitting some time. So yes, we will continue to have the discussion.
Okay.
Obviously, people aren't really excited about offering up people who are being productive in their offices to do some new things, but we will continue that discussion.
Well, and I think just so we know if it works, that's an important trial. So why don't we put a pin in that, and we can maybe get that report back from them and see where they come out on that. What we have left is Public Works and Streets. So at the top of that list, we have hot mix. Hot mix adds a penny. But then that would get them to the level that they plan to maintain going forward for their total hot mix budget, according to the materials that they had submitted. It seems like, at least in the last couple years, every one of us takes street complaints pretty routinely. I feel like the more of that they can accomplish, the better, whether it's preventative to get ahead of the pothole formation, like get holes and cracks filled with hot mix so that the moisture isn't getting underneath and breaking up that pavement so that in the spring, certain roads don't look like a war zone. So, but I don't think any of our districts are exempt from street and road complaints. I feel like everybody's got some somewhere. And so that's something that we should take a serious look at. Also in that department, there's a request for a mechanic in the motor pool. That's a big one. That's 3 cents on the mill rate. Now, they did estimate that they would save at least that amount in not outsourcing mechanical work to third parties. So that seems like it would pay for itself. Go ahead.
Okay, so I guess maybe this is in general to any supplemental ads, and especially if there's any reference to approving it on the basis of cost savings. We really either need to get some upfront offset on the front end, or at the end of the year, come back and show that those cost savings for adding that person or piece of equipment literally offset what
Right.
their
So we
what the
would either
plan
have
is.
to reduce the professional services wherever it's being paid for now. If the
Right.
outsourced bills are being paid out of some professional services account, we would need to reduce that a commensurate amount with what we would add, right?
So if we were to add a person, I would expect at least in the first year, we would get half to 3/4 of that back.
Would certainly
If
hope.
if we didn't get into the analysis or the details of it, but I think the
Well, when we
approach
asked the
was that it's a
question the other
cost
night, what they've
savings.
spent on outsourcing, the answer was more than 90,000.
Well,
So,
there you go.
we just took that at face value. I mean, obviously, you don't realize, you don't know when something is going to break and need attention, but based on the trends that they've been seeing, if they've had to send out more and more because they're short, we'd have that savings. Now, the one thing I wonder about this, though, is about recruitment, because they've had difficulty finding mechanics, hiring mechanics, and keeping mechanics for a variety of things. And so my wonder is, or my question is, would it be acceptable for us to fund this starting July 1st, and then the 2023 budget basically gets half of that amount? You'd obviously pick up the rest of it, you pick up a full year in 2024, but if you start that person July 1st, that gives them time to, go through the posting and recruiting process, but then that also reduces the budget impact to 45,000 and, 1.5 cents, not 3 cents.
So I guess my question is, can we do that for all of those positions and then have like an ROI report back at the end of the year before we fund it again? Like to see if Doug's, if they do really pay for themselves.
Before or after you do the hire? Are you talking about before, like hold off on all the hires and
No.
get the report? Or-
No, do, like you said.
Or hire them
do-
all and request the numbers?
Right. So hire them in July, like you
Yep.
said, half year, because recruiting takes time. But then get that report before we do our budget session next year is to see if there is some substantial savings in those months that they were employed.
Right. I think that's reasonable. Michael?
Yeah, I'm good with the hot mix. I mean, I think every year we've been shuffling around money for more hot mix. So I'd like to see that built into the budget. My only concerns are with the mechanic position. I can see how that will offset outsourcing, but since the repair bays are tight as it is, fitting another mechanic in there sounds like it's going to be troublesome. So that's my big concern, is getting everything to fit in there. But I think we're kind of overlooking the need of the fleet analyst position.
Well,
as that was highlighted in the
Yep.
motor pool study
Yep.
as a really a needed person in order to kind of get our hands around
Right.
our motor pool deficit.
Right, and we're getting to that. So if we would bring that person on July as well, you'd have half of the impact there also, which would bring you to about 38,000 instead of 76, right? Quick math.
And are you doing both of the public works position? Or
Well,
all
and then the
three?
third one is the safety and training coordinator, which was,
Wasn't that also from the fleet study, or no?
no, that's separate. That's a training coordinator for all of their divisions.
Right.
And safety, they don't have a safety coordinator anymore, since the one retired that was doing it organization-wide. It's probably been, I don't know what, 5, 6 years since we've had anybody.
But if we had pulled on all three in July,
You'd have 44,000 for that one, for that safety coordinator, if you put that on, which is then about a penny plus, right? So,
Yeah, I'm going to have to finagle for a little expenditure restraint then too, because we're,
That is the
like
question.
with the Public Works hot mix and the others, we're up to 102, and I think we had about 138,000 of wiggle room. So we will, if you were going to charge the mechanic to the motor pool and reclassify the expense line items so that you assumed you were going to have a decrease in outsourcing, that we could accomplish.
I think that would make sense to include those,
Then
you know,
that you
and
could absorb.
the analyst even too is actually a fleet position, right? That's a motor pool type position. So, can both of those allocate to motor pool? And does that bring us closer to our expenditure restraint?
Can I
Go ahead, Doug.
ask a question here? Maybe the Public Works Director could comment if you had to pick two of these. My read on this is that safety and training is a first-line supervisor primary responsibility. So if we were to defer or not take one of these, would that be the one you would least likely miss?
Yeah, I mean, we're managing our training right now. Everybody's getting the training. It's not efficient as it should be. And I would bring this back at a future meeting, but if I had to choose, yeah, that would be the
So
one.
that'd be the sacrifice?
Yeah, it would be the one, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
The safety coordinator one. So, and as far as the mechanic, we're still fighting over a location for the facility and
We are.
room for that person to work. It sounded though like in the current facility, space could be moved around to make room for an additional mechanic bay, and they are working altered shifts right now, right? So they're not all on during the day. So you
Yeah,
have
we-
room for a person right away?
We do have one on second shift right now, right? Is it just the one? And then we adjusted Aaron's schedule. I think.
I mean, it sounds like they're
Yeah.
kind of shoehorned in down there.
Yeah.
Is there room for this person even?
Right now, we run 2 shifts. Currently, as of today, they're all kind of intermingled just because of winter projects, so they're kind
Sure.
of both on a split shift.
Yep.
But traditionally, it's 3 and 3. We have 4 bays upstairs and 2 downstairs, and they're always really tight. But we could make it work. There's no doubt that we could make it work, whether we put that person on nights where there's not much traffic flow through the shop, where they can actually move stuff around a little
Well, that may
easier.
increase productivity too, because there's not continual distraction.
Right, or we could still figure out a way to add that person to days to help with the traffic flow through.
Right.
So,
Sarah?
So would there be premium pay if they had to work nights?
Yes.
So that would change the salary amount?
yeah, so the premium for second shift is $1.45 an hour.
So that would take us up slightly. So assuming that we wanted to do that, and, you're still recruiting for mechanics, right? How many openings do you have currently? Just one?
We have one who we have completed an interview with, and we are in the process of negotiating, if you want to say.
Okay, so this would be an added one, but hopefully you can get that one filled, so
We
you're not going to
could
be looking for
potentially
two.
be fully staffed.
Because my thought was it could probably take you into the spring to find this one even. Like, it's taken a long time on that posting for the one you're getting.
It could. We are potentially almost fully staffed, but it could take a while to fill the other one.
So bringing them on in July really wouldn't be a huge detriment. I mean, you have to move stuff around to make room anyway, right? So
Right, yeah.
if you get them mid-year, it wouldn't be the end of the world,
Right.
okay? What are your thoughts on that committee then? If we would take the mechanic July 1st and then take the analyst July 1st as well, you think both of those could be assigned to motor pool?
Yeah.
Okay,
That brings us under your levy
Yeah.
trap.
okay.
Without those two, we're at like 103,000.
Okay, so let's add up our mill rate impact. So if we're at, does that put us at 103, you said?
Yeah, 102, yep.
102?
Yeah, and 3.9 cents,
Okay,
give or take.
so, yep, .039. That's a lot better than the 16 cents we started with. So, I mean, if we added them all up to begin with, if we had taken them all at the full budget price, weren't we at 16 cents?
Yeah.
16 or 17? So
Yes.
we're at .03, we're just under 4 cents.
And so can you sort of translate that into implications then for, like how you did yesterday on 100?
So we were at $42 per 100,000, so we were at 45.
Okay.
So an extra $3
Yeah.
on a $100,000 home, and then we get this work done. So, okay, so then to recap, the projects that we took is we took the hot mix, we took the blood draws, the outreach coordinator, operating expense, we took the mental wellness program for fire, we took the mechanic starting July 1 at half the amount, we took the body cameras, we took the fleet analyst mid-year also, and that should be it. Everything else
Didn't we
Oh,
take the
and
firefighter
The fire
specialty?
training at 5,000, yes,
Yes.
sorry. So that too. And then everything else we put a hold on. Are we all in agreement that that's how we want to work it? Okay,
Well, my only objection would be, I would like to see more offsets, at least more offsets committed, if we're, especially if on the basis of cost savings. So, I mean,
so the
my
cost,
position is that we're going to do this, and we'll never go back and revisit the value of adding these on, because we are tied up against the levy limit. So we're just taking all we can from
we're
the
not
public.
going to have a whole lot of budget savings from the analyst. I mean, the analyst is going to make their operation more efficient as far as tracking the fleet. The only thing we'd have an offset on for the wage part is contractual mechanic services for the stuff that they've been outsourcing to a third-party garage. And the only way we would know is to analyze. I mean, once you get the person, like Sarah said, you have to then add up the bills that you get from these garages and figure out if it's less than the year before, right? So,
And you would be able to tally the work that they've performed in a year and, equate that to what you would have paid.
Right. That said, if we have a commensurate line item that we're paying that out of right now, we could reduce that amount by 45,000.
Right.
I mean, there's
Right.
your offset, really.
But on, like, for example, we looked at the continuation portion first. I didn't see a lot of reductions in budgets overall. I mean, we did, and maybe it's just
Under-
part of the process.
oh.
We don't,
For cost to continue?
correct.
So, yes, so under cost to continue, that's our cost to maintain an existing level of service with the existing people that you have. So then you would have to make a choice if you want to cut people or programs. And so, that certainly can be done. If we decide that we're dissatisfied with where we're coming out on the mill rate, then you have to start to cut into there's not a lot of, 2 administrations ago, we got to a point where we were done cutting fat and meat off budgets, and we were into bone. In fact, we were in such a situation that by 2016, departments were so understaffed that we actually had to ramp up staffing levels to accomplish the work that needed to get done, and curtail some of the overtime that was happening. So, I don't know if we feel that we're in a position now where the staffing levels we have are extreme, but the folks that we have, we finally are to a point where most of the departments are to a point where they're staffed to the point where they're getting done what needs to be done. We were to a point where they all had backlogs, they were behind, there was unfinished work, they were in quite a pickle about
Well-
5 years ago. So that's where if you're looking for reductions in budgets, there were times that, there was a couple mayors ago where a directive would go out at the beginning of the year telling every department to cut 10% of their budget. And so how do you do that? Certain departments have stuff to spare and certain ones don't. But the stuff that we've added over time, we'll just take, some staff was added for, to catch up on work that wasn't getting done. Some was added for succession planning. Like, as an example, a couple budgets ago, we hired a second assistant city attorney because we know that the 2 that we had, if they retire, there's no succession planning. So, now things are getting accomplished a little quicker up there because they've got that succession planning and that training in progress. So those are discussions that we had, in prior years as we added some of those positions. But, are we at a point in our budget where, we feel that, where are we at with a total increase then? Were we at 8 cents?
Oh, well,
Right.
if we were funding those others out of,
Well, because the
out
2
of
you were going to get out of motor pool.
Yeah, so we were at the 3.889. Yeah,
0.039,
yeah.
which puts your total increase at 889.
Yeah.
So 9 cents, just under 9 cents.
I guess I'm not following. So we were at a 42-cent increase.
Right?
Okay, and then you add.
And you added 0.039?
Yeah,
So isn't that 45 cents?
yeah,
Yeah.
Right, so we're at 45 cents.
yes.
So, which is just over 4% mill rate increase. So are we as a committee, yeah, and that's the question, are we willing to, we started out at 16 cents and we whittled it down to just under 4. Are we satisfied with that rate, or do we want to dig further? Sarah?
I guess it's complicated, especially with the inflation that we've experienced as an economy and just the cost of doing what we want to do. And I think we want to maintain the services we have. We can maybe dig down deeper in the future and see if there's inefficiencies or ways we can make things better. But with an over 8% inflation rate, we have to absorb that somehow. And sadly, it's going to have to be through, I think, that change.
Well, and when we have looked at service cuts in the past, it's always a toss-up as to which services you're going to cut first. But, we tried to take things that we thought were benign, and in a hot minute, the public just went crazy about it. A simple example was, at one point, the park department thought that they would cut back on mowing certain areas in parks, and there'd be some, let's say, wild areas in parks and some areas that were well-groomed. Inside of 4 weeks, the phones were ringing off the hook that, people were convinced that everything was going to be infested with wood ticks and their animals were all going to die. So we can't, you just can't, you can, but you can't. You have to be prepared for the fallout if you dig into the programs and start to cut. And, what do you cut, programs or people? There's only two things you can cut. Go
Can I
ahead.
answer that? Okay, so just so I'm not mischaracterized, I'm not asking for blind, you shall cut X percent type of thing.
Yeah,
and I'm
that
not-
didn't work.
I'm also not in a position to dig into every department budget and make suggestions, but we have heard here recently where we've had surpluses. So if we do have areas where we don't expend the money or spend the money, are we budgeting for that again? If it's been a surplus, can it be redeployed? And then maybe the biggest one is the debt services. And we just added 2.2 million on a 5-year obligation for motor pool miscalculation or whatever you want to
Deferral.
classify it as. Is
Deferral.
what would you call it?
A deferral, like accumulated deferrals of
Correct,
replacement.
because of accounting procedures. So that's a pretty big area where it would be nice to not have to do that ever again.
Sarah?
I guess I don't want to incentivize, having people if they come with a surplus at the end of the year, I want to say, yes, that's awesome. We're not going to cut your funding. I don't want to incentivize people saying, oh, crap, I have $500. I got to get rid of it by the end of the year. I'm reminded of an Office episode where they were trying to tell him what to do with the surplus, otherwise it'll get cut from next year's budget. And I don't want to incentivize that. I want, if you can find efficiencies, great. And if you come out with a surplus at the end of the year, you're not going to lose your budget stance. So
Well, that does send quite a message. I mean, you don't want to get to a point where people are in a spending scramble to make sure that they get what they need the following year, because that then really creates a terrible outcome. So, if we settle on what we picked here off the list, I mean, that adds roughly 4 cents to the mill rate. You would then set your mill rate at a 45-cent increase from last year. We still don't have our numbers from
Right.
school, county, or NTC, right?
Right, and that was based on an estimated assessed value, too.
Right,
So
and
we
our
don't have
numbers
that
in
yet.
here also were based on estimates on where we figure we're going to come out with union contracts as well, right?
Correct.
So, I mean, we may need some adjustment in either direction on that once we know how those negotiations pan out. Sarah,
So then, would we meet Thursday, or we sort of are in a holding pattern until we get these reports?
where do you think we'll be at Thursday? I mean, if we put a pin in Thursday for an additional session to see if we wanted to
Yeah.
work this through any further.
Well, we could publish based on this document.
Yep.
And then we could wait until we get our assessed value and put together a meeting, or we could meet on the Wednesday.
Pull up the calendar here.
After the,
That is, yep, and that makes sense. Okay, so because we'll also need, hopefully we'll have the equalized value by then, or the manufacturing calculations
Yeah.
too. That seems to be later this year than normal, so, okay, so we're at the 25th today. Let's say if we don't use the 27th, because we want to use some time to get those numbers in and then refigure these numbers. If we would, assuming that the council and next finance meeting, a regular meeting, move to the 15th, we should do something prior to that.
Yeah.
So,
we could send out a poll.
we could send out a poll for either the 3rd or the 9th, right? Which would give us, that's either a Thursday or a Wednesday.
Yeah.
So a quick question, so we're pushing back the November 8th finance meeting?
Well, November 8th
It's
is election day.
We're not allowed to
Oh,
meet
yeah,
on election day. So, yes, so we needed an alternate date for that, which we were going to try to pencil in for the 15th, the following Tuesday. But, if we would look tentatively at either the 3rd or the 9th, which would be our decision, our last meeting to wrap this document up. Doug?
Yeah, I'd be good with that, but I don't want that to delay the release to the public because we're getting danger close to get that feedback.
Well, that's what she said, is we would publish based on where we left off today.
I'm good with that.
And then we would make minor adjustments based on new numbers that come in, but they're not going to be drastic shifts because her estimates are pretty conservative to begin with. So, so you're good with that? We'll have Mary Ann publish based on where we left off today. And I think, and we'll vote on that. So do we have a motion to accept the items on the supplements as discussed tonight and request that the finance director publish the draft budget based on the results of this meeting? Motion by Watson, is there a second? Second by Martins. Members in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? None are
No.
opposed.
No, I'm
Oh,
voting no.
one opposed, okay. All right, so that passes 3-1, or 4-1, sorry. And then we will poll for a last session, either the 3rd or the 9th of November, if we can try to keep an open spot on the calendars for that. And once we have those updated numbers from the other taxing entities and the state, we can make our final adjustments before our public hearing, which tentatively would be on November 15th then, if that works for everyone. And that would bring us then to final budget ratification by the council on the 22nd of November. Okay, with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion by Watson, second by Martins. Members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? No one ever is. We'll stand adjourned. We'll give a couple minutes to reset for the council, and then common council will go ahead and start.